Welcome back to U.S. History. This is the last video on week 4 that we are doing today. Last video. Some of you guys may have noticed I've added a couple extra videos that I found online. One of them is what they call news reels, which basically it gives some news, but also definitely promotes American propaganda, and that's kind of what people listen to as news, since it was before television was popularized. People would go to the theaters, and that would kind of be the previews before whatever video or movie they were going to watch, and so it kind of informed Americans what was going on. So I wanted to have that just to give you an idea what a newsreel was like, also just to give you some actual footage of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The second video I put up was the Day of Infamy speech that Roosevelt gave to Congress, the declaration of war that was made. So I just wanted you guys have both of those videos. Second one more for the historical significance. The first one just to see what history was like. We're at Roman numeral 3, the fight for Fortress Europe. Hitler's Europe had been called Fortress Europe and appeared to be impenetrable. The German army pressed its onslaught deep into Russia in the east, and the Germans thought very poorly of the British or American forces doing anything. Yet small cracks had emerged. On page 508 in your textbooks, there's a map of Europe that you can see. You can see, of course, the Axis powers. You can see the greatest extent of their control during the war, the Allies, and then the campaigns that the Allies took to push the Axis back. So let's talk about some of these. Letter A, Desert War. Mussolini, in the hopes of expanding his empire, attacked North Africa. He met stiff resistance from the British and was forced back. But then Germany came to the aid of its ally, Erwin Rommel. Rommel was the leader of German forces in Africa. That's worth noting. He was also nicknamed the Desert Fox. That's also worth noting. Leading Germany's Africa Corps eastward to the Suez Canal, the collapse of Egypt seemed imminent. Bernard Montgomery was the commander of British forces in Africa. For months, the tank warfare in the desert moved back and forth from Egypt to Libya. This was the first part of the war that the U.S. will participate. Dwight D. Eisenhower, he was the commander of U.S. forces in Africa. He arrived in the western section of North Africa, pushing eastward towards Libya. Hopefully you can see on the map on 508. The British would have been pushing from Egypt into Libya. The U.S. would have been pushing from Morocco into Libya. The operation was called Operation Torch. Operation Torch was the name for the attack to retake North Africa. With Montgomery and the British pushing from the east and Eisenhower and the U.S. pushing from the west, Rommel and the Germans were crushed in the middle. Rommel was able to escape back into Europe, but by 1943, the Axis armies located there were forced to surrender. Letter B, Italian campaign. Number 1, the Casablanca Conference. This was a conference meeting between FDR and Churchill. Worth writing down. FDR and Churchill. Stalin, who wasn't present, wanted the Allies to begin an invasion in France to offset the difficulties he was dealing with in Russia. FDR and Churchill refused. They said the Allies weren't ready yet. Plus, perhaps there was some slight fear of helping the Soviet communists out a little too much. Instead, at the conference, the Allies agreed to attack Italy, considered Europe's soft underbelly. Number 2, up the boot. Operation Husky was the name for the attack on Sicily and Italy. Although suffering heavy casualties, Sicily was captured first. With a combination of naval and land attacks, the Allies slowly worked its way up the boot of Italy, as you can see on the map. On June 4th, 1944, on a very testable date, the Allies captured the city of Rome. By this time, the Italians, having begun to oppose the war, abandoned Mussolini and openly supported the Allies. You know what? It's kind of interesting. If you ever get involved in a world war, always make sure that the Italians are on the other side at the beginning of the war, because history proves is that they always switch sides partway through the war. I know that's a little history joke for you, but it's true. The Nazis, knowing their history, had prepared for such happenings and lost little territory from the switchover. Allied forces were allowed to enter Rome without a fight. Even with Italy's surrender, the Germans held firmly to northern Italy. The soft underbelly had become the rock-ribbed belly. For the remainder of the war, fighting will continue in northern Italy. Letter C, D-Day. In case you guys don't know, the term D-Day stands for literally D plus day, and it signifies any date upon which a major military operation occurs. This D-Day was so large and crucial to the war effort that it has often been called the D-Day. On June 4th, 1944, far from the cheering crowds in Rome, the German legend Erwin Rommel looked at his impressive coastal defenses on the French side of the English Channel and glanced at the threatening skies above. There would be no Allied invasion for now, he thought. Why not surprise his wife back in Berlin with a visit for her 50th birthday in 2 days? As it turned out, Mrs. Rommel was not the only one who was surprised on June 6th. On June 6, 1944, on another very testable date, Operation Overlord, also known as D-Day, began in Normandy, France. Operation Overlord was the name for the attack across the English Channel into France. Eisenhower had been made the supreme Allied commander at this point. 3 million Allied soldiers prepared themselves for the largest amphibious invasion in world history. Bad weather almost derailed the assault. Stiff resistance killed many, but the Allies were able to establish a beachhead on the coast of Normandy in France. A German soldier manning the beach defenses at Normandy later recalled the scene at first light on June. He said, "When it started to get light, I saw ships through the haze. When the fog lifted, it looked like a city out there. Between the ships, you couldn't see any water. It was unbelievable, terrifying to behold." The Allies landed on the codenamed Gold, Utah, Sword, and Omaha beaches. The invaders encountered mines and pilings along the beaches and under the water. The Germans had set up miles of barbed wire, machine guns, and heavy artillery. The Nazis resisted fiercely but could not stop the surprise invasion. This greatest invasion in history, despite its complicated nature and enormous losses of men and supplies, was a crucial success. The Battle of Saint-Lô. After intense street fighting at Saint-Lô, the Allied forces broke out into the French countryside for the push to Paris. So the thing worth knowing about the Battle of Saint-Lô was after the Allies won it, they were able to break out into the countryside of France. They were able to spread out quickly. By the end of 1944, France, Holland, and much of Luxembourg and Belgium were freed of German armies. In your books on page 510, I want you to read the tan box entitled Paratroopers in Normandy. Please read that to yourself, and then we'll continue. On page 511, I want you to read the pink box entitled George Patton. George Patton was a famous general involved in World War II. Probably doesn't get as much glory and honor as he deserves. Please read that pink box about George Patton to yourself. Once you have finished, please unpause the video and we'll continue. Letter D. The Battle of the Bulge. With the number of victories growing, some soldiers thought the war in Europe might be over by Christmas, but Hitler had other plans. The Battle of the Bulge was Hitler's last major counterattack to try to cut the Allied forces in two. The thrust through Belgium's Ardennes forest created a 50-mile deep bulge, hence the name, in the Allied lines. Germans had captured thousands of troops and completely surrounded American forces in Bastogne. When the German commander ordered the American commander to surrender his outnumbered army, the defiant general is said to have sent a one-word reply: "Nuts!" Apparently that means no. Eisenhower sent in troops to close up the bulge, and by the end of January freed all Allied troops. Hitler's last mad gamble had cost him 100,000 casualties, 1,000 aircraft, and 800 tanks. With the German army beaten, the final push into Germany was about to begin. That's all the notes that we're going to cover for today. Reminder, please make sure that you've taken the one quiz for this week. Yeah, surprisingly, now that I look at it, you only had this one quiz that you had to do. A lot of notes, I understand. Make sure that you get your week 4 packets turned in. Keep your notes. Please make sure you have them because we still have more notes to cover, as well as the World War II test next week. Hope you all have a good day. Hope you all have a good weekend. Be good, do good. Bye.